Hey friends, I'm Jim Rohn, and today I'm going to show you a psychological test that takes only 5 seconds, but it could save you from months, even years of emotional confusion and one-sided relationships. It sounds simple, but if you've ever been with someone who pulls away the moment things get emotionally close, you already know the ache I'm talking about. They can be kind, smart, charming, but when you need presence, when you express something real in emotion, a hope, a hurt, they vanish. Not physically, emotionally. They check out, they go silent, or worse, they make you feel like you're the problem. Here's what you need to know. In the first 5 seconds after you express a genuine emotional need, their response reveals everything. No more guessing, no more making excuses for their coldness. Just watch. This video isn't about villainizing anyone, it's about helping you see clearly who is capable of real connection and who is stuck in emotional avoidance. So if you've ever found yourself being the one who always reaches out first, who always wonders, did I say something wrong? You need to watch this video to the very end. Because it's not just about spotting avoidant behavior, it's about learning to protect your own heart with clarity and dignity. Make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss the videos that help you understand love, understand yourself, and stop shrinking just to keep someone else comfortable. Let's dive in. There's a kind of coldness that's hard to recognize. It doesn't come with harsh words or blatant indifference. It comes wrapped in gentleness, in rationality, in that suspiciously calm tone. I call it intellectual humility, a subtle yet powerful defense mechanism commonly used by emotionally avoidant people. It's how they keep their distance without appearing unkind. They're not angry, they don't outright reject you, but every time you open up, what you receive isn't presence, it's analysis. You say you're hurt. They don't ask more. They don't lean in. They say, maybe you're just being sensitive. You express a longing for closeness. They smile softly and shift the subject. You share your fear, and they respond, well, realistically, it's not that bad. At first glance, these responses seem reasonable, and that's what makes it confusing. Because part of you thinks they're helping, that they're just being positive. But the emotional part of you feels empty, unseen, and untouched. And then something strange happens. You begin to doubt yourself. Maybe I am overreacting. They're probably right. I should manage my emotions better. You start editing yourself. You self-censor. You begin to compress your emotional truths, those soft, real, vulnerable parts, just to keep the relationship from feeling like too much for them. That's when you need to stop. Not because they're bad people, but because you need to be honest with yourself. Are you trading real connection for artificial peace? Avoidant people aren't heartless. They just don't know or don't dare how to handle real intimacy. In their inner world, emotional closeness is dangerous territory. They've learned to survive through control, logic, and distance. They manage relationships by keeping them just out of reach. So when you express a need, even a small one, their nervous system might react as if you're threatening them. They won't scream, "This is too much." They'll just smile and deflect. They'll rationalize what you're feeling. And the heartbreaking part is you'll believe it. But logic isn't love. It's not presence. It's not safety. Securely attached people don't make you doubt your feelings. They don't say, "You're overthinking." They don't tell you to just chill or "Don't be dramatic." They say, "I'm here. That sounds hard. Thank you for telling me." Love doesn't need convincing. Connection doesn't need justification. And your emotions don't need to be logical to deserve support. Remember this. Every time you use logic to package your feelings so someone else will listen, you are subtly betraying yourself. And that slowly, quietly breaks your spirit. You were not born to shrink your emotions into something more palatable. You are not required to dress your truths in polite language just to avoid making someone uncomfortable. If someone can't stay present with the real you, they don't deserve to be there when you shine. Self-respect isn't arrogance. It's knowing you deserve presence and no performance. A soft gazano, a cold stare, a tell me more, not a calm down. You are not asking for too much. You are asking for the very thing any emotionally mature relationship should offer: real connection, real presence, and real kindness. And if someone can't meet you there, not with heart, not with presence, but only with intellect, you are allowed to walk away without apology. Because what you need isn't someone who says the right thing. It's someone who stays seven when what you're feeling doesn't make sense. If intellectual humility is how avoidants build walls with reason, then soft defensiveness is how they make your emotions feel like an inconvenience. This is the next stage in the avoidant playbook. When they can't analyze their way out, they retreat into the role of the peacekeeper, the easygoing one, or worse, the one who's being burdened by your desire for closeness. You'll recognize it not through sharp words, but through seemingly harmless phrases like, "I don't like making a big deal out of things. You always seem to overthink everything. I just want things to be simple, no drama." At first, these comments make you feel guilty, as if you're the one creating the problem, and so you shrink back. You apologize for being too much. You promise to be more chill, less needy, more agreeable. But here's the truth. You just got conditioned to minimize yourself. Soft defensiveness isn't humility. It's a strategic form of avoidance. Avoidants don't need to raise their voice to shut down emotional engagement. They just play the role of the calm one, while silently framing your vulnerability as chaos. This forces you into the role of the emotional one, even when what you're expressing is reasonable and grounded. You start doubting your most basic needs: to be heard, to be emotionally met, to feel closeness. But in a relationship with an avoidant, those needs are framed as pressure, as discomfort, as too much, and so they pull back, not with aggression, but with quiet resistance. They won't say, "I don't want to talk to you." They'll sigh, or say, "Let's just move on." And unless you're emotionally grounded, you'll start chasing them with guilt. Did I say too much? Was I too emotional? And so, bit by bit, you silence yourself again. Here's what you need to remember. Emotions don't ruin relationships. Avoidance does. And if someone feels bothered by your truth, they are telling you loud and clear that they don't have space for your full self. They only want the version of you that's easy, light, and non-threatening. Love doesn't grow in spaces where you have to make your feelings smaller. Mature love grows in the kind of space where people stay present, even when your truth is inconvenient. You cannot build intimacy on top of polite silence and careful avoidance. A securely attached person won't treat your emotions like an interruption. They may not always know the perfect thing to say, but they'll stay. They'll say, "I'm here," or "I'm listening." They won't make you feel guilty for wanting closeness. So if you find yourself constantly apologizing for making things complicated, if you're always the one trying to keep the peace by burying your feelings you're not being loved, you're being emotionally managed. Self-respect doesn't mean avoiding conflict. It means being willing to speak and being willing to walk away when the other person won't meet you in truth. It means choosing a space where both people get to be real, where imperfection is allowed, where emotional honesty isn't punished with silence. You weren't made to keep things simple. You were made for depth. And if someone finds your depth inconvenient, they're not aligned with the kind of love your heart is built for. And when soft words are no longer enough to keep their distance, the avoidant turns to their next tacticalence. After saying things like, "I don't want to make a big deal," or quietly defending their space, what comes next is a kind of presence that feels absent. They don't storm out. They don't leave visibly. They just stop showing up emotionally. They're there, but not really there. And you feel heightened: the long, unspoken pauses, the unanswered texts, the vague conversations that fade into nothing. This is what I call passive withdrawal, a form of avoidance that speaks not through words, but through the growing emptiness between you. They don't outright say no. They don't show anger, but they also don't respond. And if you have an anxious attachment style, this is where it gets dangerous, because your brain can't tolerate ambiguity, so you start guessing, explaining, fixing. You ask yourself, what did I do wrong? Was I too much last time? Did I make them feel trapped? You're not just facing silence, you're being activated by it. And in that emotional void, you do what you've always done. You reach out. You text first. You soften your tone. You work harder. But in reality, you're trying to repair a connection that only you are maintaining. And the cruel part is, they don't reject you. They just don't respond. They don't say, "I don't care." They just let you assume it. And that ambiguity traps you because there's nothing clear to push back on, nothing concrete to address, just a growing sense that you're the only one still showing up. Silence isn't always malicious, but in the hands of someone avoidant, it becomes an emotional weapon, not to hurt you directly, but to protect themselves from intimacy. They don't know how to process emotional closeness, so they retreat. But instead of saying that, they just go quiet and leave you holding the weight of that distance. And if you're not grounded, you'll start apologizing for things you're not even sure you did. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable. I didn't mean to make things weird. I just wanted to understand you better. Sound familiar? That's how you end up carrying the emotional burden of someone else's avoidance. That's how you begin to shrink, not because they asked you to, but because their silence made you feel like you had to. But you need to hear this. A lack of response is a response. Their silence is a choice, and it means something. It says, I'm not willing to engage with this. And you, if you respect yourself, must be strong enough to stop making excuses for it. You must be clear enough to stop chasing absence like it's your fault. A securely attached person doesn't make you guess. They don't leave you in emotional limbo. They might not be perfect, but they'll respond. They'll say, I need some time, but I'll come back to this. They don't use silence as a shield. They treat connection as something worth preserving, even when it's hard. Self-respect doesn't mean you don't need anyone. It means you're brave enough not to settle for half presence, even when your heart desperately wants them to stay. Ambiguous silence is fertile ground for self-doubt. Don't water the seed of your own pain by endlessly forgiving someone who refuses to show up. You don't deserve to be ignored. You don't deserve to guess. You deserve to be met with presence, not purposeful absence. Following those purposeful silences, and after you've stopped fixing yourself, you'll encounter another tactic, the image of independence. This is the peak of the avoidance pattern. When words and silence no longer suffice, they project a persona self, reliant, strong, emotionally self-sufficient. In doing so, they silently tell the world, I'm fine, I don't need depth, I'm complete on my own. Free do. You sense it in the way they speak about personal plans, work projects, hobbies, never once inviting you in. I'm planning a solo trek this weekend. I can handle this on my own. I'm good, thanks. At first, this sounds compelling. Who wouldn't be drawn to someone confident, autonomous, not dependent on others? But behind that exterior lies a curtain, a silent message that emotional vulnerability no longer has a place in the relationship. When you share your joy, they smile and say, yeah, I've done that before. When you seek connection, they bypass it by emphasizing their independence. They're not rejecting you, they're just not choosing you. Their self-sufficiency becomes a cold barrier that holds you at bay. You will feel a mix of admiration and emptiness. He's so strong. But how strong is someone who never lets themselves be vulnerable? He doesn't need anyone. Or does he simply not know how to let anyone in? Here's the crucial point. They didn't cultivate independence to connect. They did it to protect themselves. They focus on self-reliance as a justification to avoid deeper emotional engagement, even yours. You begin to internalize their message. He needs his space. He just doesn't want pressure. You shrink your own needs to elevate their independence. And the most painful part, you start to question whether your own need for space, closeness, or support matters at all. A securely attached person understands independence is wonderful, but not at the expense of intimacy. They can handle themselves, yet they'll still ask, do you need me right now? They know that unconditional love doesn't mean isolation, it means walking beside someone wholeheartedly. You must remember, strength isn't demonstrated by pushing others away, it's shown by allowing others to come close. Being powerful doesn't require solitude. Independence isn't rejection, it's the foundation for a healthy relationship where both people are strong enough to love, without having to protect themselves behind emotional walls. If you find yourself downplaying your feelings to accommodate their solo persona, you're being led by the image they've built, not by the reality of your heart. Self-respect isn't about diminishing yourself to fit their picture. It's about having the confidence to say, you're strong, but I need real connection, and I am worthy of both. If the independent persona was their shield against connection, then redirection over resolution is how they sidestep emotional responsibility quietly, but with precision. This is one of the classic avoidant attachment patterns. They don't argue, they don't engage, they don't hold space, they redirect. When you bring up a deeper conversation, maybe something that hurt you, something that's been missing, or a simple need for clarity, instead of staying present, they'll subtly steer the conversation away. It could be with humor, a change of subject, or a convenient excuse. You say, "I've been feeling a bit distant from you lately." They reply, "Yeah, work's been crazy." "Hey, did you catch the game last night?" You say, "It really hurt that you forgot my birthday." They answer, "I get it, but you have no idea how stressful that day was for me. Anyway, let's go grab that dinner you like this weekend." They don't deny your feelings, but they don't sit with them either. They shift gently, politely, even logically, to avoid sitting in the discomfort of vulnerability. And here's where it stings. You start questioning yourself. Maybe you are being dramatic. Maybe they're just trying to keep things light. You feel like the one bringing down the mood, while they seem to be just keeping things fun. But here's the truth. Authenticity doesn't kill connection. Avoidance does. Someone who wants a real bond with you won't prioritize short-term comfort over emotional clarity. Avoidants use redirection as self-protection. They don't know how to stay in the fire of hard conversations. They fear being wrong, fear being seen too closely, fear entering emotional terrain they can't control. Instead of saying, "I don't know how to respond right now, but I hear you," they crack a joke. Instead of admitting, "This is hard for me, but I don't want to avoid it," they bring up the weather, a movie, or their packed calendar. You'll find yourself constantly being redirected from the truth. Every time you get close to something real, they hand you a softer, lighter, shallower version of themselves safe to interact with, but not where your feelings can land. Over time, you stop going deep. You smile through things. You stick to easy conversation. You become the most palatable version of yourself, not because you want to, but because you've learned that real feelings always get sidestepped. And right there, intimacy dies not because you didn't try, but because you're speaking to someone who's more committed to keeping things light than keeping you close. Self-respect means holding the thread. It means saying, "Wait, I need to be heard before we move on." Because if your emotions always have to yield to comfort, then you're in a relationship where your inner world has no place. And you deserve more than that. You deserve a conversation that doesn't get rerouted, a moment that doesn't get glossed over, a partner who doesn't offer a joke, a fix, or a distraction when all you really needed was their presence. When an avoidant can no longer use silence or redirection to maintain distance, they often shift into a subtler strategy: covert competition. This isn't overt rivalry. There's no direct criticism or explicit denial. But somehow, the closer you get emotionally, the less safe it starts to feel to be fully seen. At first, they may seem incredibly supportive. They praise your strength, your insight, your accomplishments. But when you begin to truly shine in your work, in your self-worth, in how others love and respond to you, something shifts. The compliments fade. Or worse, they come with invisible strings attached. "You're doing great. Just don't let your ego get in the way. I know you're capable. Just make sure you stay grounded. You've got a strong presence, but sometimes, maybe too much." These statements sound like concern, but what you feel is contraction. You feel smaller, slightly disoriented, as if you suddenly need to justify your light, your joy, even your growth. Avoidantly attached people, often unconsciously, fear when you grow beyond the emotional dynamic they're comfortable with. Because if you become fully secure, fully radiant, fully seen, you may also begin to see how absent, emotionally unavailable, or stagnant they've been. And that's terrifying to their system. So they keep you close through subtle cues, half-hearted affirmations, or passive remarks that make you second-guess your confidence. You find yourself wondering, am I being too much? Did I make them feel insecure? And before you know it, you've begun dimming your own light to maintain peace, in a connection that was never balanced to begin with. This is one of the most heartbreaking forms of emotional avoidance. They don't fight you openly, but they can't grow with you either. Every step forward you take is met with a quiet step back on their end, not because you're wrong, but because they don't know how to stay when you're rising. A securely attached person doesn't shrink in your light. They don't feel threatened by your expansion. They don't need you to downplay your confidence so they can feel enough. They see you rise and they stand with you, not behind you, not beneath you, and definitely not in competition. If you've noticed that every time you feel good, they pull away. Every time you celebrate, they go silent. Every time you grow, they remind you to tone it down. You're not sharing your journey with a partner. You're sharing it with someone who's watching your progress to make sure you don't outpace their comfort zone. And that needs to stop. Self-respect means you don't ask permission to shine. You don't dim your dreams, soften your strength, or over-humble yourself just so someone else doesn't feel left behind. True presence is never threatened by your power, and real love doesn't compete, it grows with you. Avoidants don't always retreat into silence or change the subject. Sometimes they stay physically, conversationally, even verbally engaging. They nod, they say, "I get it." They appear to listen. But in every glance, every tone, every carefully chosen reply, you sense something undeniable. Your emotions are not truly welcome. They don't outright reject you, but they make you feel like you're somehow too much for simply having needs. You start to feel like a burden, like your pain is inconvenient, your sadness irrational, your desire for closeness excessive. You tell them you felt hurt by their distance, and they say, "I really didn't think it was that big of a deal." You express needing them closer when you're anxious, and they reply, "But you handled it just fine, didn't you?" They don't shout, they don't insult you, but their responses land like quiet shutdowns, wrapped in logic and restraint. And this subtle form of disengagement is one of the most damaging kinds of emotional avoidance. They don't directly shut you down. They make you feel like your emotions shouldn't have been there in the first place. Eventually, you hesitate before opening up. You second-guess any feeling that's not cheerful or easy to manage. You spend more time editing your tone than expressing your truth. You shapeshift into the most pleasant version of yourself, not because it's who you are, but because you've learned that your discomfort makes them uncomfortable. And over time, this doesn't just erode your voice, it erodes your sense of safety in the relationship. You no longer show up whole. You show up curated, filtered, smoothed out, because what once felt like connection has become a place where vulnerability is silently punished. They may say, "I'm here for you," but when you're hurting, they're there with a logical analysis, a neutral tone, and an energy that makes you want to retract every word. They don't explicitly ask you to carry your emotional weight alone, but you feel like you must. You begin to believe that only the soft, tidy parts of you are acceptable. But here's the truth. Real connection doesn't pick and choose which emotions deserve airtime. It makes space for all of you, your joy, your tears, your chaos, your calm. It doesn't require you to make sense before being heard. It asks only that you be real. A securely attached partner won't make you feel like you're too much. They won't expect you to always be happy or always composed. They won't pull away just because you're messy. They'll stay even when they don't have the perfect words. They'll say, "I hear you," and mean it. Not because they're emotionally fluent, but because they know presence itself can heal. If you find yourself apologizing every time you speak your truth, if your sadness comes with guilt, if you've ever had to shrink your feelings to fit the room, you're not in love. You're surviving, and you weren't born to survive. You were born to feel deeply and be held in it. To be seen, heard, and accepted not only in your strength, but in your softness, your storm, your depth. Self-respect doesn't mean never breaking down. It means knowing you're worthy of empathy even when you do. Even when you're tired, emotional, or afraid. If your truth keeps getting labeled too sensitive, too emotional, too much, the problem isn't you. The problem is that the space you're in isn't safe enough for your truth to live. Some people don't disappear, but they're never fully present either. They reply to your messages but with vague energy. They see you but maintain a subtle emotional wall. They're technically in a relationship, but it feels like they're always lingering at the edge of it, with one foot ready to step out at any moment. This isn't full withdrawal. It's controlled presence, and it's exactly what keeps you emotionally suspended, unsure, and constantly off balance. Avoidantly attached individuals often fear commitment, not necessarily because they don't care, but because commitment feels like a loss of control. To them, diving deep into a relationship is a threat. So they create a middle ground, keeping you close enough not to lose you, but distant enough to avoid vulnerability. You end up being the one always waiting for clarity, waiting for reciprocity, waiting for emotional investment that never fully arrives. You'll hear it in phrases like, "I'm just not ready for something serious right now. Let's just see where this goes, no pressure. I really like you. I just don't want to force anything." It sounds honest, even mature, but that vagueness keeps you tethered, emotionally restrained. You don't know where you stand, so you tread carefully, you adapt, you overanalyze. You begin to filter your truth just to avoid making them feel pressured. Oh, This is their tactic. Maintain power by not fully engaging. They don't reject you, but they never really choose you either. They create ambiguity as a way of keeping control. And the result? You live in a constant state of emotional limbo waiting for a text, a shift, a breakthrough. But it never comes, because they're not trying to move forward, they're trying to stay in charge without ever stepping in. This dynamic is especially painful if you have anxious attachment, because when you don't have emotional clarity, your nervous system remains on high alert. You can't rest, you can't relax, you can't trust. And while you're trying to be easygoing and low pressure, you're slowly eroding your own self-worth. A securely attached partner won't let you live in uncertainty. They might not be ready for everything all at once, but they'll be honest about that. They won't use vagueness to buy time. They won't string you along with words like maybe or we'll see, because they know relationships are meant to feel safe, not suspended. If you find yourself constantly asking, what do they actually want? If you're walking on eggshells, afraid to bring up real questions for fear of scaring them off, then you're not being chosen. You're being kept on hold. You're not a partner, you're a placeholder. Self-respect means refusing to be a blurry figure in someone else's life. It means not waiting around for clarity, you become the clarity. And if someone can't or won't meet you at the level of emotional commitment and presence you need, you walk not to punish them, but to protect the sacred space your heart is meant to thrive in. In a healthy relationship, when you share something hard, pain, disappointment, or vulnerability, the other person listens. They don't get defensive. They don't twist your words. They don't make it about them. But in a relationship with an avoidantly attached partner, there's a subtle yet powerful maneuver they often use. Reverse reflection, where your emotional truth is flipped back on you, and suddenly you're the one who's done something wrong. You say, I felt really hurt when you didn't respond for days. They reply, so you think I'm a terrible person now? You say, it made me sad that you weren't there for something important. They sigh, wow, I guess I'm always the bad guy to you. And just like that, instead of your feelings being met, you find yourself comforting them. You start backtracking. No, that's not what I meant. I'm not blaming you. I just wanted to share. It's not that I think you're a bad person. And little by little, you shrink, you edit, you abandon your truth just to keep the peace, just to prevent them from shutting down further. This isn't a conversation, it's emotional deflection, masked as hurt. They use the role of wounded to dodge accountability. They're not the listener in that moment, they're the victim of your expectation. And you, who only wanted to connect, are now cast as too critical, too demanding, too much. You begin to self-censor. Am I asking too much? Am I the one who's never satisfied? Maybe I just need to be more patient. And those thoughts, so seemingly reasonable, slowly drain the life out of your self-expression. You no longer feel safe saying how you feel, because every word becomes a potential trigger for guilt. You don't just get dismissed, you get recast as the source of their pain, even when you were the one hurting. Avoidance may not be doing this maliciously. Many truly do feel threatened by emotional closeness. They associate intimacy with danger, with judgment, with the risk of being found lacking. But you need to understand this. Their woundedness does not justify reversing the responsibility for your pain. Being uncomfortable isn't the same as being attacked, and defensiveness is not a healthy answer to someone's need for connection. A securely attached partner won't say, so, I'm just awful to you? They'll say, you felt hurt? I want to understand more. They don't treat your emotional needs as criticism, they treat them as a chance to know you better. If every time you share your heart, you end up cleaning up their reaction, apologizing for how you said it, or walking on eggshells afterward, you're not being heard. You're being emotionally managed. Self-respect means knowing that your truth doesn't make you the villain. You are not cruel for needing more than silence. You are not selfish for wanting presence, responsiveness, or emotional effort. And you are not responsible for soothing someone's insecurity by erasing your own reality. True intimacy does not make you feel guilty for being honest. It gives you space to show up fully, not just in your joy, but in your hurt, your confusion, your vulnerability. If your truth keeps getting turned against you, the problem isn't the way you said it. It's that you're speaking into a space that isn't emotionally safe. After unpacking everything, the logic-wrapped shutdowns, the soft defensiveness, the controlled silence, the reversed blame, you might be wondering, How do I spot this sooner? How can I avoid getting pulled into a dynamic that chips away at me little by little? The answer lies in the smallest window, the first 5 seconds after you express an emotional need. It sounds almost too simple, but the truth is, the nervous system doesn't lie. In that fleeting moment when you open your heart, you don't need a long speech. You just need to look and feel. The first sign is a subtle but clear shift in energy. It might be a glance that breaks, a facial expression that fades, a flicker of warmth that suddenly goes cold. If you've ever seen someone leave the room without moving an inch, just vanish emotionally the second you got vulnerable, you've seen it. No words are spoken, but something in the air changes. You feel it in your gut. The connection just cracked. The second sign is a delayed or evasive emotional responses, if they need to escape the moment before it becomes real. Maybe they pause awkwardly, excuse themselves, or change the subject. As soon as you offer your vulnerability, their presence slips. They don't physically walk away, but something in them does. And you feel the absence is sharp, silent, and unspoken, like you're suddenly talking to a wall that just appeared between you. The third sign is when they instantly reach for humor or logic to dilute what you've shared. Instead of sitting with you in your hurt, they make a joke to lighten the mood or say something like, "Well, that's just your feelings talking." It may sound lighthearted. It may even sound reasonable. But what they're actually doing is sidestepping intimacy, dodging the discomfort of just being with you without needing to fix or avoid. All three of these responses are small, subtle, easy to miss. But if you slow down, if you stay honest with your body, you'll feel them. And the most important part is this: you believe what you feel. Don't talk yourself out of it. Don't make excuses. Don't tell yourself, maybe they're just tired, or maybe I'm overthinking. When someone cannot stay with you in the moment you open up, that is a signal worth pausing for. Because a securely attached person, even if they don't say the perfect thing, won't vanish when you show your truth. They might say, "I don't know what to say right now, but I'm here." They stay not because they're flawless, but because they value presence over perfection. And you are worthy of that presence. If you've ever found yourself analyzing their mood, waiting for clarity, apologizing for feeling too deeply, or shrinking just to keep someone from walking away, you've experienced avoidant attachment. But starting today, you don't have to keep guessing. You don't have to keep performing. You don't have to become easier to love to stay in a relationship built on uncertainty. Because now you've seen the truth. Real connection doesn't make you question your worth. It doesn't demand silence for the sake of peace. It doesn't treat your feelings like a problem to solve or a test to pass. You deserve someone who stays not only when things are easy, but especially when they're not. You deserve a love that doesn't need conditions, fixing, or explanation. And remember, avoidants don't mean to hurt you. They're simply afraid of feelings, often even their own. But you're not. You know how to be present, you know how to feel, and you get to choose presence with yourself. Choose firm boundaries. Choose not to keep placing your heart where it can't grow roots. Self-respect doesn't mean fighting someone else. It means standing with yourself, even if that means walking away from where you once desperately wanted to stay. You are not too sensitive. You are not asking for too much. You are finally waking up, and that may be the most beautiful thing you've ever done for yourself.